Welcome in, everybody. We're diving deep today into the world of a company you might not know by name, but I guarantee you know their products.
You got that right.
Yeah.
We're talking Mrs Bectors Food Specialities Ltd.
MBFSL.
Exactly.
So we're going to be taking a deep dive into this company, learning all about their history, the industry, and how they're doing financially. We've got two main sources we'll be pulling from.
Their annual report for the year 2023-24.
And an investor presentation from November 2024. All right, let's get started. You know what gets me excited about this one?
What's that?
It's the story behind the company. This isn't your typical corporate origin story.
Not many companies can say they were started by a Padma Shri awardee. That's India's fourth highest civilian award.
Exactly. Mrs. Rajni Bector herself, talk about an inspiring founder.
Absolutely. She launched MBFSL way back in 1995, and, well, I think we can all see how far it's come. It's one of the biggest players in the biscuit and bakery industry in India today.
Okay, so she wins this major award in 2021, and her story is just, well, it's remarkable. She starts baking in her home kitchen, right?
Just for friends and family. Yeah. Then she turns it into a booming business.
Talk about following your passion.
Yeah.
And her company ends up listed on not one,
but two major Indian stock exchanges.
The BSE Limited and the National Stock Exchange of India Limited. That's pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And they show no signs of slowing down. Take a look at their product list. It's massive. You've got popular brands like Milky's and Cremolo.
I love Cremolo biscuits.
See, you know what I'm talking about. But get this, they also make Oreos and Choco Bakes cookies for Mondelez, India.
Whoa! I did not know that. Those are some pretty iconic brands.
They really are. MBFSL is behind a lot more brands than you'd think. And here's something else that stands out to me. They're really committed to sustainability. They're using alternative energy like PMG and LPG, and even installing solar panels on some of their facilities.
It's always great to see a company balancing growth and sustainability. Okay, so back to those 384 biscuit varieties.
Yeah, 384 different types of biscuits. It's mind-boggling.
It sounds like they're catering to every taste under the sun.
From the classics to the more adventurous flavors, they've got it all.
All right, so we've talked about their history, their impressive founder, and their commitment to sustainability. But what about the industry itself? What's the outlook for biscuits and bakery products in India?
Well, let's put it this way. The future looks pretty sweet. The Indian biscuit market is on a serious growth trajectory.
What kind of numbers are we talking?
Think about this. It's projected to jump from $3.19 billion USD, that was in 2022, to a whopping $4 billion USD by 2029. That's a 4.13% compound annual growth rate, or CAGR for short.
A CAGR of over 4%. Yeah, That's pretty healthy growth.
It really is. And it's not just about population growth either. There are a lot of factors driving this demand.
Like what? I'm curious to hear what's fueling this growth in the biscuit market.
Well, rising disposable income is a big one. People have more money to spend, and biscuits are an affordable treat.
Makes sense. People are looking for tasty snacks they can enjoy. But is it just about convenience and affordability? Are there other trends shaping this growth?
There's definitely a shift in consumer preferences happening.
Oh, here's where things get interesting. Fill me in. What are those shifting preferences all about?
Health is becoming a big factor. Consumers are demanding healthier choices, things like gluten-free biscuits, low-calorie options, or even biscuits with more fiber. They're not just grabbing whatever's on the shelf anymore.
So they're getting more discerning.
Exactly. And it's not just about ingredients either. They want exciting flavors and eye-catching packaging too. It's all about the whole experience.
So the biscuit market is evolving. What about bread? We can't forget about the other half of MBFSL's business. What's happening in the bread and buns market?
Oh, the bread market is going through a dynamic shift as well. The mid-premium and premium plus segments are really taking off.
Premium plus bread. Now that I gotta hear more.
Think of your typical loaf of bread. Now, imagine adding grains, seeds, or some interesting flavors. That's your mid-premium bread.
Okay, I can see that.
Now take it a step further. Protein breads, fancy foot-long breads with gourmet flavors like roasted garlic and Parmesan.
Ooh, gourmet. I like the sound of that.
And specialty breads like ciabatta, panini, and pita. That's premium plus territory.
Okay, now I'm starting to see why these segments are outpacing the rest of the market. People are willing to spend a little more for something special. But is it just about the fancy flavors and the premium ingredients?
It's more than that. People are more health conscious. They're looking for breads that fit their dietary needs or are perceived as healthier.
So it's a combination of health, indulgence, and I guess a bit of a treat-yourself mentality.
You got it. And those trends are pushing the growth in these premium bread segments.
Fascinating. So we've got a booming biscuit market and a bread market going gourmet. The question is, how is MBFSL positioned to capitalize on all of this?
Well, from what we've seen so far, it looks like they're in a pretty good spot. I mean, think about it. They've got this massive product portfolio.
Yeah, those 384 biscuits, the premium breads, they seem to be ticking a lot of the boxes we've been talking about.
Right, and they've got those strong brands we talked about. Plus, their distribution network is huge.
Just how big are we talking?
Over 490 super stockists, more than 1,250 distributors, and they're in over 700,000 retail outlets across India. It's pretty remarkable.
Hold on, you said super stockists. What exactly are those?
Think of them as large-scale distributors. They act as the middleman between MBFSL and all those smaller distributors who supply the retail stores. It's how MBFSL can get their products to so many consumers.
Okay, that makes sense. So they've got the products, the brands, and the reach.
They're in a strong position to capitalize on these trends.
All right, so let's get down to brass tacks. How are they actually doing financially? Are those Oreos and Cremolo biscuits translating into profits?
Let's just say their financial performance is definitely something to celebrate. Their standalone revenue for 2023-24, a whopping $15,117.48 million.
Okay, hold on. That's
Nearly a 20% jump from the year before.
wow, that's a big jump. But revenue is one thing. What about their actual profit? Is all that revenue translating into money in the bank?
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Their net profit for that same period, $1,233.28 million. That's a 61.72% increase from the previous year.
Over 60%. That's incredible. What are they doing right?
Well, they've been really smart about their pricing, they're managing their costs effectively, and their expansion into new markets is clearly paying off. Plus, their focus on those premium products, especially in the bakery segment, is giving them a boost.
So they're not just growing, they're growing profitably. That's a great sign. And what about their consolidated performance? Taking their subsidiaries into account. Is that painting a similar picture?
Even better, actually. Their consolidated revenue hit $16,239.45 million, which is a 19.22% increase.
Still impressive, yeah.
And their consolidated net profit, get ready for this, $1,403.61 million, a 55.83% jump.
Wow, those are some impressive numbers. And it looks like they're sharing the success with their shareholders, too. They declared dividends, both interim and final, for a total of $3.25 per share.
That's good news for investors, for sure.
It sounds like they're doing a lot of things right, but let's dig a little deeper. Let's break those numbers down and see what's really driving their success. We'll start by looking at their revenue growth across those different segments. What's the story with their biscuits, bakery, and exports?
Well, if we take a closer look at those segments, we start to see some interesting patterns emerge. Starting with biscuits, their annual report shows they brought in a hefty euro 10,580.65 million in 2023-24.
Wow, that's a lot of biscuits.
It is, and it represents a 16.32% increase from the year before.
Okay, so biscuits are a big part of their success story. What's driving that growth? Any specific product categories doing particularly well?
Well, their focus on premium biscuits is definitely paying off. And of course, they've been expanding their distribution network. Plus, those iconic brands they make, like Oreo, are always a hit.
Right, Oreos are practically a global currency at this point.
Yeah.
What about the bakery segment? Is it keeping up with all those biscuits?
Oh, it is actually even better. They brought in $4,424.05 million from bakery products in 2023-24.
Hold on, that's
a 30.24% jump from the previous year.
wow, that's serious growth. What's fueling that? Are those premium breads we talked about really taking off?
Absolutely. Their English oven brand is a star performer, especially on those fast commerce platforms.
Those are the ones that promise super fast delivery, right?
Exactly. People want their groceries and their fresh bread delivered quickly, and English oven is capitalizing on that trend.
Makes sense. People are busy. Convenience is king. Okay, we talked about how MBFSL is expanding internationally. How's that going?
Their export market is doing quite well, actually. They pulled in over $11,112.78 million in revenue in 2023-24.
That's not too shabby. Where are they sending all those biscuits and bakery products?
Their Cremica brand is in over 65 countries. They're strong in North America, Europe, the Middle East, and they're even expanding into Southeast Asia and Africa.
Wow, sounds like they're truly going global. All right, let's talk profitability. We've seen those impressive revenue numbers, but what about the bottom line? What do their EBITDA margins look like? How are they managing those raw material costs that are always fluctuating?
Well, first off, their EBITDA margins are pretty healthy. They came in at 12.63% for 2023-24.
I think some of our listeners might not be familiar with EBITDA margins.
Well, you're right. It stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's a way to measure a company's operating profitability. Basically, are they making money from their core business operations?
Got it. So a healthy EBITDA margin is a good sign.
Exactly. And 12.63% is a good number. It shows they're managing their operations efficiently.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
What about their profit after tax, or PAT, as they call it? How did that look?
Their PAT saw some great growth. Their standalone PAT, that's just the company itself, jumped to 1,233.20 million. That's a 61.72% increase.
Wow.
And their consolidated PAT, which includes their subsidiaries, reached 1,403.61 million. That's a 55.83%
Okay,
increase.
so they're not just profitable, they're becoming more profitable and impressive. But, those raw material costs are always a wild card in the food industry. How are they handling that?
Yeah, it's a challenge everyone in the industry is facing. The cost of ingredients like wheat flour, sugar, and edible oils is always going up and down.
So what are they doing about it? Passing those costs on to consumers with higher prices.
Well, they've made some strategic price adjustments when they've had to, but they're also trying to find other ways to manage those costs. They're negotiating better deals with their suppliers, making their supply chain more efficient, even looking at alternative ingredients. They're being proactive.
It's good to see them trying to absorb some of those cost pressures themselves instead of just passing it all on to us consumers. Okay, we've talked about their financial performance, but what about their plans for the future? What are they doing to grow their market share, both here in India and internationally?
Well, domestically, they're really leveraging their distribution network and pushing into new areas, especially in South and West India.
Yeah, they seem to have a really strong presence in North India already.
Exactly. So expanding into those other regions is a natural next step. They're really focused on building relationships with local distributors and tailoring their products to regional preferences.
That makes sense. A one-size-fits-all approach probably won't work in a market as diverse as India.
Mhm.
And what about their international expansion plans? Any particular markets they're targeting?
They're looking to expand their global footprint, but they're being smart about it. They're looking at new markets, of course, but they're also strengthening their position in the markets where they're already doing well.
It's a delicate balance, right? You don't want to grow too fast and lose control, but you also don't want to fall behind. Okay, let's talk about capacity utilization. How efficiently are they using their existing factories and production lines?
They're operating at a pretty high level of capacity utilization, which is a good thing.
So they're making full use of their resources.
Right. It means they're meeting demand and getting the most out of what they have. But to keep growing, they're going to need to invest in expanding that capacity.
So what are they doing about that? Building new factories, upgrading existing ones.
Both, actually. They're investing in new facilities and they're upgrading existing ones. It's all about boosting production and keeping pace with that growth we've been talking about. They're also embracing automation and technology to become even more efficient.
Sounds like they're not afraid to invest in the future. Speaking of the future, we talked a bit about brand performance, but let's dig in a bit more. How are those key brands like Cremica and English Oven performing out there in the market? Are they holding their own against the competition?
Both brands are doing really well. Cremica is a strong player in the premium biscuit segment, and English Oven, like I mentioned, is really taking off, especially in that fast commerce space.
They're catering to both the traditional and the new age consumer. Okay, let's wrap up by looking at their overall financial health. How are they managing their finances? Are they in a good position to fund all these growth plans?
The financial health looks very good. They've got a strong balance sheet, good cash flow, and they're managing their debt levels effectively. They're taking a cautious and well-planned approach to capital management.
Okay, but what does that actually mean? What should our listeners be looking at to gauge their financial stability? What are some of those key indicators?
Well, you can look at things like their debt-to-equity ratio. That tells you how much debt they're using compared to equity to finance their operations. And their interest coverage ratio, which shows how easily they can cover their interest payments. Well, you can look at things like their debt-to-equity ratio. That tells you how much debt they're using compared to equity to finance their operations. And their interest coverage ratio, which shows how easily they can cover their interest payments. And in both cases, MBFSL is looking solid.
So, not drowning in debt, but they are investing a lot in growth. How are they funding all of that? Are they taking on more debt, issuing more shares, or Are their profits strong enough to handle it?
It's a mix, really. They're using some of their profits, what they call internal accruals, and some debt financing. Their cash flow is strong, so they can cover a good chunk of those growth investments themselves. And because their credit rating is good, they can get pretty favorable terms when they do need to borrow money.
So they've got options. They're not over-relying on debt, but they're not afraid to use it strategically. It sounds like they've got a pretty solid game plan. Profitable operations, careful financial management, and those strategic investments we talked about. I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing here. What are your overall thoughts?
I agree. They built a really strong business, and they're using it to push themselves forward. But, every company faces challenges,
Yeah.
especially in an industry like food where things are always changing, consumer tastes change, competition heats up.
Yeah, no business is immune to that.
Right?
So what are the biggest challenges you see ahead for MBFSL? What should our listeners be keeping an eye on?
Well, staying ahead of those changing consumer trends is going to be huge. They've adapted well so far with the healthier options and the online shopping push, but they've got to keep innovating, keep anticipating what's next. They can't just react.
Be the trendsetter, not the follower.
Exactly. And their expansion strategies, both here in India and abroad, are going to be crucial. Can they maintain this momentum in new markets? That's a big question.
Yeah, finding that balance between growing too fast and not growing fast enough. It's a tough one. What do you think is their biggest opportunity moving forward?
I think their commitment to innovation is what sets them apart. They're not just going with the flow. They're trying to create the flow. New products, new markets, new technologies. They're not afraid to try new things. That gives them a real edge.
It's like they're the ones making the waves, not just riding on them. Okay, last question. Give me your final thought-provoking insight for our listeners to chew on. What should they be thinking about as they consider MBFSL and their future?
Adaptability. That's the key takeaway here. MBFSL has been incredibly adaptable to changing markets, to new technologies, to shifting consumer demands. The question is, can they keep it up? Can they keep evolving at the pace this industry demands?
Can they stay ahead of the curve? That's the million-dollar question. It's been a fascinating deep dive into the world of Mrs Bectors Food Specialities Ltd. They've got a great story, a strong present, and a future that looks pretty bright. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Just keep your eyes on those key things we talked about. Their innovation, how they expand, and how they adapt to those inevitable changes in the food industry. It's going to be an interesting ride.
Well, to our listeners, I encourage you to follow along. This is a company worth watching. The most exciting chapters are probably still to come. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.